Okay, as we move further into the market structures and seeing how the economy works, we need to talk about something called a business cycle. A business cycle is simply just fluctuations in the economy. Usually, when we look at a business cycle, we're looking at something like this. Where the economy expands, goes up, it comes down, it goes up, it comes down. We're always in this roller coaster type of movement in the economy. Now, as you can see, we look at how the economy is working over time, and that's what the horizontal line here measures, is over time. And along the vertical axis here, we're measuring GDP. And GDP stands for our gross domestic product. That is defined as the monetary value of all final goods and services produced in a country in a year. We're going to come back to that at the end of our look at business cycles, but just wanted to throw that out there for you. When we look at the business cycle, we can see that there are four distinct phases that the business cycle goes through. The upward sloping portion we call expansion. Expansion includes growth in GDP. More people are working, more people are making an income, incomes are going up, demand for goods goes up. It's a time where all of these positive things that we think about the economy are occurring. Expansion, though, cannot last forever. And how quickly it peters out will depend on how quickly it went up. It will depend on lots of factors. Usually, expansions will hit a peak. The peak is that topping off period, the top of the roller coaster. The economy tends to peak when businesses can no longer, for whatever reason, expand any further. It could very well be that businesses are running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. They just cannot physically make another thing. No matter how much there's a demand for it, they just can't make it. That occurs. It could be a time when businesses just get nervous. They're afraid to expand anymore. Lots of different reasons. But eventually what happens is we hit a peak. It's a point in which we have the maximum output of the economy. Eventually we leave that peak. Sometimes we go back into an expansionary period, but more likely we have a contraction. Contraction is that downward portion of the business cycle. During a contraction, sometimes called a recession, sometimes called a depression, during this contractionary period, we see a decrease in output, a decrease in jobs, a decrease in spending capabilities, a decrease in, sometimes a decrease in wages. All of the things that seem to be bad for the economy. And then eventually we hit the bottom, which we call a trough, and that's where the contraction stops. Sometimes we languish in that trough for a while. Sometimes we don't. We hit the bottom and we bounce right back up. Now, from an economist's point of view, economists like business cycles. In the expansionary period, it's great because we get more stuff, we get different stuff. Businesses innovate, We try new things. Some are good, some are bad, some are crazy, some are wonderful. But also expansionary periods encourage people to enter business who may not be efficient. The economy is expanding quickly. It just draws people in trying to make a quick buck. They may not be using their resources efficiently. So expansion, while it gives us more stuff, may not use resources efficiently. Now, contractions we normally think of as bad. We know that, that how could they be seen as anything but bad, right? People are losing their jobs, output is decreasing. But from an economic perspective, we see contractions as having a good side also. During a contractionary period, businesses are forced to become more efficient. If they want to make a profit, if they want to stay in business, they have to cut costs. They have to use resources efficiently. And if that means cutting back on the number of goods they produce, okay, so be it. It has to happen. Yeah, we're not saying it's great that people lose their jobs, but from an overall efficiency perspective, contractions can be a good thing. Now, let's look at an expansion and a contractionary period from the 19 teens through the 1940s. Now, in the United States, the post-World War I period was a period of great expansion. Incomes were increasing. We saw households making what we call a family wage. It only required one person in the household to work in order to be able to support an entire family. That was a good thing. Prior to the 1920s, most working class families needed to have 2 or 3 people in the household working in order for the family to survive. In addition to the increasing incomes, more people were working, wages were stable, output was increasing. It was the Roaring 20s. It was a great time. But during the 1920s, there were some silent signals that were being sent to the economy, to the market, that there were problems. We averaged 600 bank failures a year during the 1920s. We also saw 20,000 business failures per year. Now, during a period of time when things are expanding, when there's great demand for goods, having bank failures and business failures was very unusual. The bank failures we can link to the Dust Bowl and the drought that was occurring in our agricultural sector. Probably most of these business failures we could link to that also. But there were signals that this expansion of the 1920s was not a stable expansion, was not something that we would be able to sustain. The summer of 1929, the stock market started on a roller coaster going up and down, and things were going crazy. And then we get to October of 1929, and everything just collapses. On October 28th, 1929, the stock market crashed by 12.8%. Now, that was only 38 points, but given the size of the market, it was almost 13% of the market value. The next day, on October 29th, the market crashed again, going down almost 12%. or almost 31 points. That was devastating to the economy. It shook investor confidence. It shook business confidence. It created a mess. And so October 28th, 1929 is considered the date that the Great Depression began. It was the day we fell off the peak and we started tumbling down the roller coaster. The contractionary period had begun. We economists, historians, date the year 1933 as the trough of the Great Depression. So from 1929 to 1933, the economy was in a free fall. It was dropping. It was going down that business cycle. And we measure the magnitude of unemployment, of the Great Depression by unemployment figures. And what we see is that in 1929, unemployment was for the year 3.2%. But by 1933, it was 25%. 1 worker in 4 who wanted a job could not find one. And so the Great Depression hit the economy very hard. We languished in the trough of the Great Depression for quite a while. Historians and economists tend to disagree on exactly when we got out of the Great Depression. From an economic perspective, we were probably slowly eking our way out in 35, 36. We were starting up an expansionary period, not quickly, not with great force. But by 36, 37, it was pretty clear we were getting out of the Depression slowly. Europe entering the Second World War in 1939 helped boost our economy because they began demanding more and more products from us. So that helped. But most historians date the U.S. getting out of the Great Depression to December 7th, 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor, and December 8th, with the U.S. formally entering the Second World War. In our next lecture on business cycles, I want to look at some explanations for why depressions occur, because we need to understand why depressions occur in order for us to figure out how to fix them. All right, and we're going to look at some of the theories as to why depressions occur. So we'll see that in the next lecture on business cycles.